Over the last few years, we have seen a huge rise of Chinese lens makers, and it seems like a lot of those lens makers are starting to level up at this point. One of the less known players on the market is the company Brightin, and they have jumped upscale and into the autofocus market with their new AF 12mm F2.8. It has an extremely wide 122.5 degree angle of view, and as you can see here, even though I'm only about 8 feet away from the camera, it has a lot in the frame. So this lens, it tests a new price point for them, and it also tests autofocus. And as we're going to see in today's review, they've really done quite a compelling job on a lot of these fronts. At the same time, however, there are some alternatives, including one from a more established brand like Laowa and their own autofocusing 12mm F2.8. So does Brightin have enough to distinguish themselves from the pack here? Well, that's what we're here to explore in today's review. Before I jump in, I do want to say a big thank you to Brightin for sending me a copy for review. At the same time, they have had no input in this review. They will not see it before you. This is a completely independent review, and my conclusions are my own. That aside, let's jump in, let's take a look. All right, let's take a closer look at the build and the design of the Brightin here. So price is currently at launch, it's $609.99 USD, and it will jump up to $659 later on. The Laowa 12mm f2.8 autofocus lens retails for about $699, and so this is going to run anywhere between $50 and $90 less depending on when you buy it. Now, as far as the advantages of the Laowa, which I reviewed a year or so ago, it is lighter. It can receive traditional front filters on it. It has some advantages when it comes to the aperture blades, just the overall shape of the Sunstar there, and its close focusability. The Brightin advantages is that it is smaller, it has more features to it, it has less vignette, it's a very competent lens. This is a very, very wide angle of view, 122.5 degrees of view, and so just pointing down at my shoes, you can see it's a long way down to my shoes there. Part of the design here is that there is a front fixed lens hood. This is not removable, and so traditional filtering is out. And so they try to compensate by giving you a rear filter thread here. It's somewhat odd 34mm filters. However, they do sell them in a very inexpensive price, purposely designed for this. And so you can get, this is a clear night filter, but you can also get a couple of different ND variations, ND 1000, ND 64, and those would be very useful for long exposure. And so you just can unthread those at the back and apply them. Other thing you'll see here is a weather sealing gasket. It is the only gasket here. There's no other internal seals. My bigger complaint is that the actual fixed lens hood, when you're out in weather like rain particularly will hit from the side and get on that. And as you can see from these shots, you can definitely see it in images. And so that's a little bit of a concern there. It does have an aperture ring. It is declicked, and that's the only option. There's a nice firm detent between F16 and A. I like that it's nice and firm there. There is no iris lock, however, and so you can rack through all of the aperture like I've done here with this shot with the flare, and so you can see going through those aperture options smoothly. You also have a function button here that is whatever value you have assigned from within camera, and an AF/MF switch. A nice feature set there. You know, it's not exceptional, but definitely more than what the Laowa offers. The build quality here is actually really nice. It's a nice looking lens, very traditional looking, but you know, it's going to still look good in another 20 years. And so all of that is fine. It is a little bit heavy, however, because everything here is pretty dense metals on it. And so it weighs in at right under 500 grams or 17.6 ounces. So it is considerably heavier than the Laowa, even though it's a smaller lens. The lens is 70 millimeters in diameter, or 2.75 inches, but because of that fixed lens hood and that curved front element, it's a little bit longer. So 96.6 millimeters, or 3.8 inches. As you can see in general, though, it is a very compact lens that pretty much fits in your hand. There are 7 blades inside. I don't love the Sunstars, and so I definitely prefer the 5-blade version of the Laowa when it comes to Sunstars. Another place where I definitely prefer the Laowa is when it comes to the minimum focus distance. Here it is just 30 centimeters, so that's pretty long for such a wide lens, and the resulting magnification is super low. It's not listed, but it's somewhere around 0.05 or 0.06, very, very low. The Laowa will allow you to focus 16 millimeters closer, which is obviously results in much higher levels of magnification. So a very nice build quality, and it's a very functional lens. I enjoyed using it out in the field, other than just that issue where rain would get on that front element. I do wish you could use traditional front filters as well, but those kind of niggling concerns aside, it is a nicely done lens. So let's talk autofocus. Now, this is the first autofocus lens from Brightin that I've reviewed, but it comes across as being a pretty mature product in many ways. Now, to be fair, wide-angle lenses like this tend to have a lot in focus all the time. Right now, I'm only about a meter away from the camera, but as you can see, not only am I in focus, but this whole scene is in focus as well. And so for that reason, autofocus travel doesn't have to go very far. But at the same time, I don't want to undersell what Brightin has done here, because autofocus, I'm assuming from an STM type focus motor, it is fast, it is utterly quiet, and it is smooth and accurate in operation. You can see here in my formal test as autofocus goes back and forth that there's not a huge focus change that's taken place, but definitely we're moving back and forth with good speed there. And I never heard any sound from the focus motor in operation. What's more, I used this lens actually to do some supplemental photos at a wedding I shot last weekend. And on the dance floor, for example, I was getting, the bride and groom's first dance and some other dances there. And so sometimes I used a flash with it, but sometimes I wanted just a little bit more mood in the shot. And so even though I was shooting in a very dim setting, obviously, autofocus was instantly snappy and it was accurate in that setting. It was quick enough to be able to stop action, and I didn't have to worry about it at all under that circumstance. So I would say that autofocus really does a great job, and no concerns with it on that front. Now on the video side of things, again, there's not a huge focus change taking place here. And so if you look at my touch to focus, you'll see that it's moving back and forth with good smoothness. There's a minimal amount of focus breathing, but that's largely because there isn't a whole lot of focus shift that's taking place. I did notice in my hand test that despite there not being a lot of focus breathing, there is just a little bit of that kind of lurching sensation that isn't quite as cinematic as what I would like. But obviously this is going to be a great focal length for things like vlogging or using on a gimbal when you want to have a lot in the frame all the time. And so I think it has some very interesting video applications, and I had no problems with autofocus. And as you've probably noticed in these segments that I'm shooting on the lens itself, it has no problem keeping focus on me and not jumping around or being unstable. So in general, autofocus I thought was pretty great. All right, we'll start by taking a look at the optical design here. We have 15 elements in 11 groups, and you can see that includes a couple of aspherical lenses, a couple of low dispersion lenses, and then a couple of high refractive index elements as a part of it. Taking a look at the MTF, and we're going to focus on the green because that's more relevant with modern resolution cameras. You can see that in the center of the frame, extremely sharp. Mid-frame, it's still looking quite good. As we get towards the corners, however, you can see it's a pretty steep drop, averaging out somewhere here in this 45% ratio. Now this is a very wide angle of view, and if I just rotated the camera down and shot towards my feet, you can see that it's a long way down to the ground, and that's the effect you're going to see with a wide angle lens like this. This is a 122.5 degree angle of view, so it's really going to visually give you the illusion of pushing things away from the camera. Now, obviously, with a really wide-angle lens, there are a couple of things that you're typically going to run into. One of those is distortion, and the other is vignette. Now, I will say that the distortion is exaggerated some because of the close focus distance at 12mm, and so it's not going to look like this in almost any kind of real-world situation. That being said, this isn't a bad amount of barrel distortion for this wide of a focal length. However, it is very slightly complex, and you can see that by correcting most of the middle, actually will create a little bit of a pincushion effect on the very edges. And so you kind of have to pick your poison there. And unfortunately, there isn't going to be in-camera correction profiles available for the lens itself. This is about a plus 11 or 12 to correct to this degree. Now the vignette, although it's not perfectly corrected, and it does have a very slight amount of discoloration. There is a significant amount of less vignette than what I saw on the Laowa 12mm F2.8. I used a plus 74 to correct for this, whereas with the Laowa, I had to max out the slider at 100 and still had about this amount of vignette left over. So obviously a lens this wide is going to be an interesting one for shooting interior spaces. And in general, this has zero correction on here. I wasn't unhappy with this at all. As you can see, you don't really see that barrel distortion very much when shooting in a perspective where you're not right on top of the subject like we were with the test chart. And so you can see here again with all of the lines, there's a little bit of curvature on this line right here, but I think that most people could probably live with that. Here's another kind of interior space. And again, right off to the very edge, you can see that there's a bit of a bow to this line. You could correct that fairly easily, and I don't think you would have any kind of major issue. So it definitely could be an interesting lens to use for interior space / real estate photography, architecture, things like that. So we're going to take away a couple of things from this image. First of all, if we look closely here, you can see it's nice and sharp. That's not really our takeaway, but we're looking more for fringing as you go out of focus, and we see just a very minimal amount of fringing, just a tiny bit in some of those specular highlights here. The truth of the matter is that there's going to be very few situations where you're going to be able to create this degree of defocus anyway. The other thing is to look very quickly at bokeh. Not that bokeh is a primary concern for this lens, but just to give you an idea that if you are able to create a little bit of defocus, what you're going to see is a fair bit of outlining, kind of a little bit of a soap bubble effect. And so it's not the smoothest bokeh that I've ever seen, but then again, this is not the purpose you buy this lens for. More important would be lateral style chromatic aberrations, and while we see a tiny bit of those, it is very, very well controlled, and so that's not going to be any kind of real factor. So here's the test chart that we're going to examine. This is shot on a 61 megapixel A7R Mark V, and I'm going to show you results at 200%. So that's extremely demanding. That's what I work with here. We can see in the center of the frame that, as the MTF suggests, results are fantastic. Very sharp, very good contrast, just pretty much perfect. The mid frame is a little bit less good than what I anticipated, and it isn't just on that side. Over here, it's looking equal. As I look in these places, I expected a little bit more than what I'm seeing here, and the corners, as expected, are looking a little bit softer. I tried focusing in the corners to see if that made a difference, and it really didn't. And so unfortunately here, as we move off towards the mid frame and the corners, it's just at f2.8. It's not nearly as sharp as what it is in the center of the frame. In a real-world shot here, we can see that at f2.8, I mean, that's very nice and crisp in the center of the frame, and obviously depth of field means that in a lot of these situations, the focus point is here. But as I look off towards the sides here, I feel like, that is definitely very acceptable focus for this kind of work. I can see all of the details there, and I have no problems with any of that. If we compare f2.8 to f4, we can see that there is a little bit more contrast and resolution in the center of the frame, but frankly, that's not really where we need it. What we need it is where we start to move off towards the edge of the frame. Now, you can see that while it isn't like all of a sudden perfect, it is improved here. That's all the writing here is a little clearer. This kind of logo symbol here is looking clear as well. Likewise, there's just a little bit less of a jittery quality, though contrast is still not fantastic in this zone. If we look down towards the extreme corner, again, we see definitely improving, just not excellent yet. Comparing f4 and f5.6, I don't really see any kind of improvement in the center of the frame. It was already great there. Here in the mid frame, it is, again, it's a slight improvement. It's not like radically sharp yet. The corners here you can definitely see a strong improvement here. It's more just in that last little bit that they're not improving as much. That's also true here, where this is looking pretty decent, but as we look off towards the end of the frame, you can see even from this zone to right here that things are really starting to soften. Again, to put that in some real-world perspective, here at f5.6 at 100% magnification, you can see that the detail is looking really quite fantastic. And if I pan off towards the edge of the frame, yes, it's falling off a little bit right here at the very corner, but frankly, I don't know that too many people are going to be examining your image right there at the very, very corner. And if we look at any place where a little bit more of it is apparent, that's actually looking quite crisp and nicely detailed. Here's a second example here at f5.6, and so you can see in this zone, I mean, that's beautiful detail. And as we move off towards the edge, you can see it start to fall off here in that last few percentage points. But again, it's not until you're getting to that very, very edge and even out just a little bit, the detail looks much better. There's not really much of a further improvement at f8. It looks kind of more lateral compared to f5.6. At f11, we're going to start to see some softening due to diffraction, though in this case, it's not extreme. You can definitely see it gets progressively worse by f16, which is the minimum aperture, but it's not a huge variation. Now, as previously discussed, the magnification level is really, really low here, and we can see that in the center of the frame on the subject, the lens is nice and sharp, but it's not a particularly flat plane of focus. And so we can see if we look off here towards the edges, obviously it's falling off as we get towards the corners, not nearly as good there as what it is in the center of the frame. Now, when it comes to flare resistance, it's largely okay, particularly at larger apertures. However, you've probably seen in some of the shots of where I'm filming that you can definitely see a bit of ghosting artifacts. You'll see it a bit here. Here, if you stop all the way down to f16, you get the most pronounced sun stars, but I also feel like you get the most strongly pronounced flare pattern. And you can see here as if I do this aperture rack, that as I stop the lens down, the flare effects get more noticeable. If I pan back and forth a bit, you can see that in general, flare resistance is fairly good, but I would keep it at hopefully, less than f8, somewhere in that range, and so that you're getting a little bit better kind of flare resistance than what you get at smaller apertures like f11 or f16. So what's my conclusion? Well, in many ways, I think that Brightin Star has done a pretty impressive job with this lens, and when I go into reviews, I try to go in with minimal expectations, but I do have some expectations. And in this case, I would say that this lens pretty easily exceeded those expectations. It did not feel like a budget lens really in any particular way. And while there's a few design choices that I didn't necessarily love, it's not because the lens feels cheap or unfinished in any way. In many ways, it feels like quite a polished product. I see two potential challenges for Brightin Star that are somewhat connected. The first of those is that they are not, at this point, the market is fairly saturated, and there are some good products, including a 12mm F2.8 autofocus lens from Laowa that's not a whole lot more. And of course, Laowa is a more recognized, established brand that allows you to do front filtering, has closer focus, it's a lighter lens, that has some things going for it. Also, they are testing a higher price point than what they've done before. This is the first lens that I can find that they have sold north of $500 US, and anywhere between $610 and $660 US means that we're now up into a range where there's a fair amount of competition at that price point. Maybe not at this exact focal length and aperture combination, but certainly options in the market. And so I think that they're going to have to find out whether or not the market is ready for a Brightin Star lens at that particular price point. At the same time, however, you got to make the move at some point. And so I want to commend Brightin Star for being bold here and expanding their horizons with autofocus and feature set, and even with price. And in many ways, I would say that this lens does feel deserving of that price. In fact, when I was doing the text review and I was looking through my image quality results and looking at chart test, it kind of struck me that when I started doing reviews of camera lenses 15, 16 years ago, this lens is way better optically than what even the expensive Canon L series zooms that I was testing at that point, wide angle zooms, able of giving us much, much better corner performance, just better sharpness in general. And so it really strikes me how far lens design has come. And so this is a very capable lens in its own right, but it does of course come to a much more saturated competitive market. But I do wish Brightin Star the very best, and if you're considering this lens, it is definitely worthy of consideration. And so I commend them for this, and I hope that this is the beginning of many more excellent lenses from them in the future. If you want more information, you can check out my full text review, which is linked in the description down below. There's also some buying links there if you'd like to purchase one. As always, thanks for watching, have a great day, and let the light in.